And I said, well, yeah, welcome to life. That's kind of the way the tax system is too.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Comstock Channel. I'm Marlin Bohling with you. Always a pleasure to have you on board with us as we talk about all things that are ag-related. And I want to remind you to like these videos, subscribe to the videos by clicking on the bell icon down below. It's easy to do. That way we'll let you know when we post the next episode. And share these videos with others as well. Thanks to your help, we've been really growing here this past year, and a lot of that credit goes to you. Thanks for passing the word along. We're one of the fastest growing ag podcasts out there anywhere right now with your help. Well, today I have Roger McEowen with me, and he is a legal expert in ag law. You're technically at Washburn University. You have a long title, Roger. Explain your title for our audience so I get it official here.
Yeah, well, my official title at the law school is Professor of Agricultural Law and Taxation. But I also am on the faculty at the Ag Econ department at Kansas State University, where I teach an undergraduate ag law course, and I'm the attorney for the Kansas Ag Mediation Service, which is run out of K-State. So kind of have dual roles there, and I also reserve a third of my time for private practice.
Now, did you get all that? Okay. Anyway, thanks. Thanks for spelling that out, Roger.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. You have been a busy camper. I haven't had a chance to talk with you since last spring, I believe. And I know you have been on the road quite a bit here lately. Maybe for attorneys, maybe it's seminar season. Is that the deal, or what's going on?
Well, yeah, I'm on the road in any given year, 80 to 100 events a year, and many of those are 8-hour seminars for CPAs and attorneys. On tax and ag legal issues and farm policy, farm bill, those types of issues. And I'm just about ready to head out again on a swing that's going to take me to North Dakota and South Dakota, Nebraska and Iowa, and then back to Kansas over the next couple of weeks. I recently was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, not for the Fed's meeting there, although I would like to have been there. They wouldn't like what I have to say about their policy, but nevertheless, did 2 days in Jackson Hole and a day down in Mississippi, 2 days over in Missouri, and that's just the past week or so. So it keeps me on the road pretty much all the time, full time from May through Christmas.
I know you talk with a lot of other ag-related attorneys and compare notes and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Give me, if you would, maybe your top 10 things that was on the discussion list this year that really caught your attention and you need to relay to your clients out there.
Top 10 in no particular order, I guess, off the top of my head. Potential elimination or sunset, I should say, of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act at the end of 2025 and the implications that has for clients from a tax planning and estate planning standpoint. What do we do if that were to expire? What do we do for clients when rates go up? What would happen with respect to a reduction in the federal estate tax and gift tax exemption amounts? What would be the impact for clients? The elimination of the qualified business income deduction, which is a big one for farming operations. What are some planning issues that we could do? Or is there things that we can't do if that law were to sunset? And a whole host of other issues associated with the potential reduction or potential sunset in that law, which will happen if Congress does nothing. That's already in the equation. That's what happens once we get to the end of 2025 on a lot of these provisions. That was a major tax bill that was put into place beginning in 2018, and that's going to go away at the end of 2025. So that's in the top 10. I would say farm policy in terms of farm bill or lack thereof is also in that top 10. Some of these clean fuel credits, that's going to change. We're going to change sections of the code starting in 2025, and what are the implications for clients with respect to that and the so-called climate smart agricultural practices to be able to qualify for the credit. Will it benefit farmers or not? That's a big issue that's out there. The whole repeal of the Chevron doctrine by the U.S. Supreme Court and the impact on government agencies, including the IRS, in terms of writing rules and writing regulations what's the impact going forward with respect to that? And that filters back to attorneys and CPAs, how we argue cases, how we take positions on behalf of clients that might be based solely on Treasury regulations. Do we pay attention to those? Do we not? Well, it depends on how they were developed, and the Supreme Court's decision might have an impact on that. And another Supreme Court decision that's received less attention is a case that says when a government agency fines you based on the underlying statute that allows the agency to administer fines, and this would include USDA, even though this was an SEC case, you have the right to a jury trial before your money can be taken away from you. So what's the implication on these agencies, including USDA? Say you get a fine for violating Swamp Buster or some wetlands rule, and now they're going to impose fines on you. Can you say, I want my peers to hear this. I don't want to get caught up in this administrative bureaucracy and appealing this. I want a jury trial to protect my due process rights. And that's a major decision. Received less attention in the press than the repeal of Chevron, but I think it's just as important. So those are just a few that would be in the top 10. And then, of course, we've had some significant tax court cases and some other significant court opinions across the country, too. And those are things I talk about for practitioners that they're interested in servicing their clients.
You mentioned some of the labor laws. What's going on? There's so much talk about immigration and trying to get maybe seasonal workers across the border legally, and it puts producers in an awkward situation, doesn't it? Where somehow they have to prove that the workers have like a green card or something.
Right.
Explain
Well,
what is going on with that this year.
Yeah, the government has changed the I-9 form. And that's a new form that took effect last fall, and producers need to be aware of that and fill it out completely. And then there have been some significant cases involving H-2A workers and the application of that to various aspects of agriculture. A recent case involved a sod farm or a turf farm, and whether the workers there qualified for purposes of where the H-2A workers or are they not. So we get those nuances in agriculture when we step outside of the traditional row crop farming and we get into hand harvested commodities. We get into sod farms, turf farms, those types of things. Well, what's the classification of these workers? Because the problem for that operation is if you misclassify, and the government holds you to that misclassification, if they claim you've misclassified, you can get into some serious penalties. So there are some issues with respect to that. That new I-9 has got to be completed properly. But you're right. With the influx of foreign workers and the potential of hiring those that did not properly come into the country, if you hire in somebody that's not here properly, you can get into some pretty big trouble as an employer.
It appears to me that the election, no matter which way it goes, it could have a huge implication when it comes to things like estate tax on the farm. And that is a big ticket item nowadays.
Yeah, it is. If you look at what's happened with land values over the last 20 years, I know, Marlin, when I started practicing, the federal estate tax exemption was $600,000. Now we're at $13.61 million. Now land values have gone up, but that is a very generous exemption. And if you look at where we're at in the transfer tax system as a whole, a very high exemption, $13.61 million per individual. So if you have a married couple, that's $27.22 million, if I did my math right. And that's a big deal. And you get step-up basis at death and portability of any unused exclusion amount at the death of the first spouse that can be ported over to the surviving spouse and added to their basic exclusion amount. So we've got, I think, the best of all worlds right now. And what I tell practitioners is it's not going to get any better, no matter who occupies the White House. The best we can hope for is that we keep that we stay steady and continue to have the inflation adjustments upward on the basic exclusion amount. But there's a possibility it could go down. And if the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is allowed to expire, then that exemption is going to be basically cut in half starting in 2026. So we go from what's anticipated to be at that time 14.3 million down to about 7.15. And so for a married couple, that would be 14.3. That's a game changer for some farming operations. Those that would be exempt because they're under 15 million could then become potentially subject to estate tax and would need to do some further planning. The estate tax is one that's largely avoidable, but you've got to do certain things and have the right set of facts to make sure that it doesn't affect your farming operation.
Are there any new options that you can implement nowadays that weren't available, let's say 5 or 10 years ago, to help avoid that?
Yeah, not real. I wouldn't call them new options. They were available. They just weren't well thought of or well understood. And this is one of those, for example, that I talk about at my seminars are known as a Section 721 exchange. So instead of doing a like-kind exchange under the 1031 rules, the heirs, when the property passes from the last of the parents to die, it goes to the heirs, they can put it in what is known as basically a legacy fund with a whole bunch of other farms, and then they get ownership interest in that partnership that owns all these farms. So they still holds these farms. They still have the ownership interest in it, but it's now not land; it's shares in a limited partnership, and they can either sell their shares entirely outright. They can hang on to them. They could sell certain shares at a certain time, depending on what their goals and objectives are, but they still have the right to maybe live on that farm, continue to use it as their own, and nothing looks like it's changed out to the public. But what they get is a greater diversification of their investment because you have a whole bunch of farms from all over the country that are in that fund. And so that's a technique that's picking up steam across the country. It's starting to be more well known in the practitioner community, and I teach it at my seminars, and they can pitch that to their clients as an option to an installment sale or a like-kind exchange. 721 exchange is just another tool that the advisor has to offer their clients.
Now, can the value of those shares change, or are
Yes.
they always going to be set at that value?
No, as the fund value increases, the value of their investment goes up.
Okay, so on a similar track, what's going to happen again after the election? I'm worried about what will happen with capital gains tax.
That's a good
Are we looking
question.
at big changes there?
Potentially, depending on the outcome of the fall election and who controls the House and the Senate. The proposal on one side is to increase capital gains by 33%. As well as the corporate income tax. So you'd take corporate income tax from 21 to 28. You'd take the capital gains tax basically from generally 20 to about 25 to 27, around in there. So it's about a third for each one of those. And that would be pretty difficult to deal with. And now it remains to be seen whether there would be income thresholds where it wouldn't apply to people under certain income thresholds. We don't know much of the details of that yet. So that makes it very difficult for planning advice to clients at this point in time. We're going to have to wait to see what the fall elections hold and then who controls the levers in the House and the Senate to get a clearer picture of what the tax rules will be. And I've already got scheduled a major seminar in January to look at these things. And hopefully by January, we know the outcome of the election by then. We seem to have trouble in this country running federal elections. So maybe we'll know outcomes by January where we can give advice to clients better than we can right now.
Have you done any research, or has someone shown how many times, like for every dollar that you earn during the course of your lifetime, let's say this year in 2024, for every dollar, how many times is that taxed anyway?
Well, I think probably you're getting into what's known as the multiplier effect. If I have $1 and then I spend that dollar and then that is used, or I invest that and a bank uses it to loan the money and somebody else uses it. I haven't looked at that in a long time, but you earn it and it's taxed. If you invest it, it's taxed at some point in time. Particularly if you invested in capital asset, then when you sell the capital asset, the appreciation in value is taxed. If you die, it's potentially taxed in your estate if you're up above a certain value, or you live in a state that has an inheritance tax, such as Iowa or Nebraska. So there, you put it in property. Okay, there's probably a property tax that would apply to that too. So you have multiple stages of taxation all throughout the use of that money and throughout your life and even at death. It's kind of like the students here at the law school and even in undergraduate colleges say, well, I pay my tuition and then I have to pay these fees associated with being a student, might be a recreation fee, might be so forth and so on. And then when I graduate, there's a graduation fee. And I said, well, yeah, welcome to life. That's kind of the way the tax system is too. They'll get multiple cuts out of you. The point of view, as I tell them, is that you want to live your life not bleeding to death while the government takes these cuts out of your hide.
What about Social Security?
That's a good one. I often get asked the question, when's the optimal time for me to start withdrawing Social Security benefits? And my snarky response back to that is I can tell you precisely when the correct time to draw benefits is if you will tell me precisely when you will die. And of course, can't do that. So I can only give you certain guideposts, generally speaking. And I say, well, you can start drawing benefits at age 62. And I would say, take it all out, start withdrawing at 62, only if you can discipline yourself to take everything you withdraw out every year or every month and invest it. Because you will beat the Social Security system if you don't spend any of that when you take it out. Invest it until you're at least 70 and let the market grow that. The market will always outproduce what the government will do. Yeah, you'll get a lower amount, but you can beat that generally, historically, if you invest that. Now, obviously, if you wait until full retirement age, or then again until age 70, you're going to maximize the amount that you can pull out. And if you want to work in retirement, you got to watch the earned income levels, because then you face a reduction in your benefits if you are not at full retirement age yet, because the government's going to claw some of that back if you get up above certain income thresholds. So those are some of the set guideposts that are out there. Then I incorporate this in a lot of my tax seminars as, should you look at Social Security as a tax or an investment? And it's kind of fun to play around with that because, we get into your average career earnings and you get the bend points and there's a lot of projections, but all it comes back to is how long you're going to live. And that's kind of a guessing game we do with respect to that. So we just do the best we can.
Are there any changes in privacy laws, either to improve them or have they been made less secure here in the last year?
That's not something I really get into, so I can't really speak to that for sure. I just don't know. Now, the one thing that's of concern that I do get into, this is a concern to practitioners, has to do with a provision that was in the Corporate Transparency Act a few years ago. And that's a big deal. By the end of this year, it's going to require a lot of businesses to file beneficial ownership information reports with the Financial Crimes Network of the Treasury. So it's an IRS type deal. And you have to report your beneficial owners, those that have a 25% or more stake in your company, to the Financial Crimes Network. And it was designed to determine who are these people that have ownership in shell corporations. But it's much broader in its application. And so a lot of farming operations that haven't had to file this information will have to file. And basically, you can think of this as if you generate less than $5 million in gross receipts every year, and you have a filing requirement with the state, such as a corporation or an LLC or whatever the case might be, you've got a new filing requirement that for just about everybody is going to kick in at the end of this year.
When I think of the government, I guess I always have this concern that they work under a gotcha theme. I know in years past, I keep thinking of cases where maybe livestock operations were totally fine, but then maybe a government agency would come out and fly a drone over their livestock operation after a heavy rain or something and say, you're violating water law or runoff law or something like that. Or it may be a rare instance, but then they get written up for something that was almost an act of God, if you will.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if farmers have any protection against things like that now or not.
Yeah, or they fly a drone over and find your still on the back 40. Uh, but the Sackett case out of the U.S. Supreme Court in late May of 23, really has pinned the EPA back on doing some of that. That was a very prominent opinion dealing with what is a water of the United States. We have a new standard that will help farmers a lot because the government said to tie that to a water of the United States, that stream, that water course on your ranch or your farm has to have a continuous surface connection to a navigable water of the United States. So if it's just a dry ephemeral stream, that's not going to meet the test. And the government just lost a case in Idaho on that point. And the court said, well, you haven't satisfied the new standard since Chevron is gone. You've got to show more, government, to assert that on this ranch in central Idaho, they are subject to the EPA rules that you think they violated. So we're getting some greater protections because of what the Supreme Court has said, not because of what the agencies have done or what the people that write the laws have done, but what the Supreme Court has done in terms of changing the review standard.
Well, I know of one instance where one particular, when I farmed in Kansas, we would call them draws, where you have a bit of a gully and some water would run through there occasionally.
Yeah.
However, we did have some irrigated ground there, and I knew in this one case where there was a neighbor about 2 miles up this draw that had a half section of irrigated ground, and they irrigated a lot. Well, the runoff, it was flood irrigation, and it would run down through there, and that was actually declared navigable water or a running stream when it was actually, when the inspector came out, it was actually irrigation water that was running through there.
Right.
But the instant you turn that irrigation well off 2 miles upstream, the water would disappear.
Yeah.
But yet somehow that, and this is a bad pun, that ruling held water.
Well,
I just wonder if things are getting easier to fight a deal like that.
Yeah, I would say yes on that particular issue. And related to what you were saying, 30 years ago or so, there was a case that came out of the Chicago area that gave us what became known, I should say, as the glancing goose test to determine jurisdiction by the federal government over a wet area. The government came up with a test which at that time was upheld by the court. And that test was, well, if a duck or a goose or some other migratory waterfowl in their migration glances over its wing and contemplates landing in that puddle, that was enough of an interstate commerce connection to put that puddle in interstate commerce. And so hence the term or the phrase glancing goose test. That's how crazy this got. But the Supreme Court now has pinned a lot of that back and said, no, you have to show a continuous surface water connection, continuous surface flow. And that's going to stop some of the silliness. And there was even a case, this thing didn't, there isn't a reported opinion on it, but it was at trial, and they ended up settling it out of Missouri, where the lawyer for the farmer was asking the government official, the technician in this one, where he said, if this were a baseball field and a batter was standing in the batter's box and he took his bat and banged the dirt off his cleats and it dropped to the ground, would that be an illegal discharge of a pollutant into navigable water in the United States? And the response was yes. We haven't seen that level of silliness in the last 3 or 4 years, and I don't think we'll see that going forward, given the Sackett decision and now the repeal of Chevron.
Well, we're heading into the harvest period in the end of the year. Anything farmers and or ranchers should keep in mind as they get closer to the end of the year? What kind of things should they do to prepare for that?
Well, we never want to forget our general tax planning concepts as we come into the end of the year. Should I be deferring income? Should I be pulling income forward? If I think rates are going to go up, then I want to push my business expenses off to the extent I can. I don't want to prepay stuff. I want to push those business expenses off into a year when the taxes are higher so I can get a greater deduction. But it depends on your cash flow situation and a whole host of things. But do I need to service debt? Those types of things. Should I be electing farm income averaging? The government is projecting that farm income is going to be down somewhere between 20 and 25% across the board this year. Well, maybe this is a time that you have your tax practitioner elect farm income averaging for you and smooth out, pull some of the income out from a previous year, any year in the previous 3 where your income was high. And now if you hit a low year, move some of that into this year if you can fill up that existing tax bracket, but it'll pull some of the income out of the prior year and maybe drop your tax bracket. So over a 3-year period, you end up saving tax. Farmers can do that. Non-farmers can't. So those are some of the general strategies. You never want to forget about those. And then watch to see what happens in the fall elections, and we can get a better handle on where tax policy is going to be. And then we might need to adjust, might need to change our structure of our business or create a structure if we're going to lose that qualified business income deduction, which is a 20% deduction on your business income if you're not a C corporation. If we lose that one, that's a big one for a lot of sole proprietors and farm partnerships and the like. So a lot of things to think about. Life doesn't get any easier, it doesn't seem, as we go on into the future.
Roger, always great to talk with you. I wish we had even more time, but I'll wrap it up here and we'll talk with you again, maybe more around the end of the year or start of next year, something like that.
Sounds good.
But
thank you.
Thank you for the update. I always look forward to our talks. Roger McEowen, and we thank him for the information. Again, if you have comments that you want to share with our viewing audience, make sure you comment down below, and maybe we can get a discussion going on there about some legal issues impacting your farm or ranch. Well, for producer Brianne Hendrickson, I'm Marlin Bohling. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll catch you next time on the Comstock channel. Thanks for joining us on our Comstock YouTube channel. Don't forget you can also find us on Facebook and TikTok as well. Futures trading involves risk. The risk of loss in trading futures and or options is substantial, and each investor and or trader must consider whether this is a suitable investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results.